So welcome to SoTalk Fall 2021. My name is Sophie and I come from SoCentral, who hosts these SoTalks on different sustainability topics. SoCentral is a company working on big challenges, and we have 9 years of experience on new ways of collaborating to reach the sustainability goals. We believe that we can only create sustainable shifts for our people and our planet in collaboration. And to do so, we run arenas and projects and experiments where people from different backgrounds and sectors work towards a common goal. And this fall in SoTalk, we will dive into the 1717 model, which we have strong faith in as a model on how to collaborate across sectors on a large scale to solve complex challenges. And it's a model that has been tested in several places in Norway. And we are now curious to how other cities abroad and in Norway can take the model in use. And as always, we want to hear from you. So you can ask questions in the chat to all of the speakers. And feel free to bring in the questions as the speakers speak, and we'll bring it up at the end of the event. But today we are also curious about what you want to learn more about on this model. So this is the first of a series of 4. And we would like to set the next event topics based on what you want to learn more about. So please let us know in the chat what you would like to dive deeper into in this model. And you can also send me an email after the event at sophie@socentral.no. So let's dive into it. Our first speaker today is Julia Lipton, Head of Innovation at C40. And you may have met her in our previous SoTalk about regenerative city development. And we are so happy to have you here with us again. And Julia will talk about the importance of cooperation and partnerships to create sustainable urban city transformation.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Paulina. Special shout out to Sydney. It's so good to have you on the call. I am Australian, as you will hear from my accent. I'm very happy not to be in lockdown in Australia, but my heart goes out to all of you that is currently. We are broadly through it in Europe, but it's not gone away. It's hard times. For those of you that don't know, the C40 Cities Network is a leadership network on climate change. You see all the cities listed there in the bottom there. Sydney is one of them, Oslo is one of them, Copenhagen, my current home, is also one of them. But all around Global South, Global North, cities are coming together to lead on climate change. We have 97 cities, in fact, so C40 is just a brand that is quite recognized now, but we're 97 cities, representing about 700 million people and a quarter of the world's GDP. Obviously, our cities are the centers of urban population, of commerce, of productivity and connection. So people come together, they come for opportunity, they come to live, work and play in the city. And that's why it's so important to work with our cities on climate change. Not only are they feeling the impact of climate change, but they're also where the solutions are. But I guess you know all of that. So without further ado, as Sophie said, I am the head of innovation and newly the director of climate action planning as well. So I've got my work cut out for me. But what the innovation dedicated focus of C40 is always looking at the next level of climate leadership in cities. 1.5 degrees, as stipulated by the Paris Agreement, is the ultimate ambition. That probably won't go any further. But as the IPCC's report recently came out, is that our time to do something and achieve that safe 1.5 degrees is getting shorter. So what we always need to do is be looking for the most efficient and effective ways of doing the things that we already know, as well as looking at the next opportunities. So that's what we do in the innovation team with C40. Our theory of change is bringing together all cities to exchange their ideas. Basically, one city is fundamentally the same, although completely politically and culturally different from another. But they share the same problems, and therefore the solutions can scale really rapidly. The other thing that they all share is the current predicament that we're in the pandemic. Things are increasingly becoming uncertain, volatile, and very hard to do climate action really effectively. So this innovation capacity is looking for all sorts of new ideas to help our cities achieve their very ambitious goals. How do we do that? We need to explore new approaches, and that's what we're doing here today. And SoCentral does so well, and our cities particularly are interested in working with their communities. There's a real need and want for our communities to be part of the solution. So they're looking for ways of empowering business and communities together to co-create solutions, and that is empowering. There's all sorts of things, community wealth building, citizens panels, deliberative democracy, participatory budgets. They're all methods that are broadly being used by cities all around the world, but there's no real common practice, and there's still a lot to be learned in methods to do that and how to do it really effectively. The other thing that's really important is redefining economic value in this 21st century that we live in, and particularly in COVID. What we're seeing in cities is revolutions in e-commerce, in working from home, in unused spaces, in buildings. There's all sorts of revolutions happening in how we live, work, and play, and how cities stay on the forefront of that, and again, co-create solutions with their businesses and communities about what is most important in this era, and how can we work together to make that happen. And finally, new financial mechanisms. It's one thing to empower the community and businesses together to rethink what is important in this era that we're living through, but we need to transform the financial mechanisms that are currently geared very much to the old paradigm of working, which is all about profit and value in a very economic sense, that is concentrated, quite frankly, in the growing rich and creating inequality in our cities. So there are three sort of fundamental things that we're looking at in the innovation space of C40. We do it across the organization, but we are looking forward to hearing today about the various things that are happening in cities so that we can learn and share with the rest of the network. I will leave you with a quote that I just love so much. When people think of innovation, they often think of technology. When I think of innovation, I think about this quote from John Naisbitt, that the most exciting breakthrough of the 21st century will not occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human, which goes to the heart of why we need to collaborate. We all need to come together and realize that we have a role and a purpose in this new way of living. And with that, I will hand back to Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you for leaving us with a lovely quote. And next, you will now hear from the CEO of SoCentral, Thomas Werner, who will introduce us to the 1717 model, as well as you will hear from Elin Hoff Johansen, Senior Architect in the City of Oslo's Planning and Building Services, and how they have used the 1717 model.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Julia, and good morning, everyone, at least for those who are on the Oslo time zone. I'm so happy to see so many friends on this webinar, but also quite a few new people, which I hope to connect with. As Sophie said, I'm Thomas, CEO of SoCentral, and being a colleague of Sophie, we are basically doing what she said, trying to find new models for how do we collaborate, how do we partner up. And really what you said in the quote, Julia, that we also believe that this is really about people coming together in new ways, that we have to not only focus on technology and sort of the things we need to do, but we also need to shift our minds and find ways of really connecting again. During the last 7 months, I've been living here. So shout out to all my Mauritian friends who's on this call. Part of the work we did in Mauritius was really, together with many of the people you see on the screen, was to see if this 1717 infrastructure could be used outside of a Nordic context. It has been a very interesting journey, and I'm really happy to say that the team who came together in Mauritius is now launched Regeneration Mauritius based on the infrastructure. And also the newly appointed, or just to be appointed, president of the association is just on the call as well. So Stelio, good to have you here. Today, I'm going to go through some of the key elements of the infrastructure, and also try to bring some examples of how could this infrastructure bring value to cities and also countries. I'll end by talking a bit about how do we possibly scale this infrastructure to other cities, and that will also basically be an invitation to all of you, because this is nothing we can do by ourselves. That's also why I'm happy that several people from C40 is here, so that we can continue that discussion on is this possible and how could it be done. I will not go that much into details of how you set up the infrastructure today, but very happy to get questions on that on the panel later. And that's also maybe something we can focus on the later webinar. But first, why do we call it infrastructure? And why do we call it 17.17? I think everyone here is well aware that we need change. But I think what is important to acknowledge is we need change in a different speed than the normal progress of society. If you look back sort of 1,000 years, we do progress. Things are a lot better now than it was 50 years ago. It's a lot better than it was 100 years ago. So we will, the progress is not the problem. We are making the world better. The thing is now we need to speed up that process. And I think this is sort of the key component why we have been involved in developing this infrastructure, is because we need to change the pace. And a question that was asked was, is that possible? Is it really possible to change the speed of change? And a lot of people have said no. One of the reasons is that we know that changing cities and making them more sustainable or even regenerative will require us to really know how do we solve or at least address wicked problems. So wicked problems are problems that are so complex, so interconnected, that it's almost impossible to solve. And it requires us to sort of have so many different stakeholders coming together, coordinating, thinking, understanding the problem together, and then also finding solutions together. And the structure we have today in society might not be the best structure to solve that. So, each company, each organization is extremely important. This is a very efficient way of making change, but in a more incremental way. And now we not need to bring all these organizations together in some sort of form to address these huge challenges we have. And this process of creating the infrastructure has been a long process. It started in 2015, actually at the conference in Trondheim in Norway, where one of the speakers, after a 2-day event on the green change that we need to see in the world, challenged the audience of saying, so we are talking a lot about collaboration, but what do we need to do differently? A small group of people sat down and that developed. We got a research grant. There's a lot of people involved. And then it ended up in a pilot in Oslo, in Hovenbyen, which Elin will talk a bit more about later. And now we have this framework, this model that now is working in Oslo. And we call it infrastructure, not because it's like, it's not roads, it's not telecom infrastructure, but there's some similarities, because we think that if we are to collaborate in new ways, we need that structure of collaboration that can foster this collaboration to be there long term. It can't be there on a project basis. And this is what we've seen over and over again, that we do collaborate a lot, but it's basically on a thematic area or a project basis. So that is why we call this an infrastructure, to get our minds to think that this is something you invest in, this is something you build where you need it, and then everyone can use it. And the reason why we call it 17.17 because this, the SDG goal number 17, which we all know. I think all of us know that the 1 to 17, but many of us do not know about the targets underneath each goal. During a conversation actually with the Vice Chancellor at the University of Mauritius earlier this year, we started discussing the different targets, and then we realized that what we've built here is a very concrete solution to target 17.17. So that says that we need to encourage and promote these effective partnerships, and we need those kind of infrastructure and models to do that. So what we're saying here is that the infrastructure we're going to present today is a very concrete solution to targets that the UN says we need in order to reach the goals. In Oslo, this infrastructure has now been working for some years. It has been focused on sustainable city development. And I will now just take you through some of the core elements of the structure before going in and showing you some examples of the value that has come out of it. And as you see in this picture, this is actually very close to where I'm standing at the moment. This is also sort of the core part of the structure. People coming together at a specific place, trying to understand what's happening, and then using their different experiences, the diversity that group has, to think what can we do differently, and then start acting on it. I'll just briefly also say that even though Oslo has been the lead city in developing this, the structure has also been now copied in 3 other cities in Norway, and as I said, also in Mauritius. In Mauritius, the focus area has not been city development, but food systems. And that was also part of a wish we had to see if this structure actually worked, one, without in a different cultural context, and also on a different wicked problem. And even though there's still, still early days in Mauritius and regeneration Mauritius, we have been very positive to see that the structure with very few alterations can be scaled and replicated in another context. So some of the key elements. So what does this infrastructure consist of? The first part is that to solve these challenges and to collaborate, we need to acknowledge that it's only people who collaborate. Okay, you could say that also there's some machines that collaborate, but if you are to find these solutions, it's actually us as people, us here together, that need to connect in new ways. So the whole idea and the whole framework is built around people. How do we connect? How do we share knowledge? How do we come together? How do we create things together? How do we support each other? How do people who are not normally involved in these processes, how do they feel invited? So that is really the core element. But we're not saying that organizations are bad or a problem. We're just saying that we need to understand what organizations are. And that's something, at least for me, it's been a journey on this, coming from an economic background and really been working in private sector all my life, is to realize, organization is something we created in order to do things at scale. And we need organizations if we are to change the world, because that's the only way we can do things at scale. But we have created them for specific reasons. So what we want to do here is we bring the organizations also on board on this infrastructure as partners, but it's still the employees in those companies that are the core element. That is always them that are doing something. But bringing organizations into the structure means that we also need to answer the question we all need to answer to our bosses or our boards or whatever, is what's in it for us. So there needs to be this connect between what is practical, what is pragmatic, what can we do short term, how can we benefit from it. So that's also something that's been really worked on this in the structure. How do you get value out of this as an organization? A third core element is to focus on a specific place. So this is called a place-based approach, nothing new. But that has also been and is a core part of the infrastructure, is to say we'll build the infrastructure somewhere and you focus on that area. In Oslo, it's been is a big development area, which you see here. It's called Hovenbyen. It's quite large. In Trondheim, they're actually focusing on 3 different smaller areas in the city, which is going to be developed. And in Mauritius, they have said that we focus on the whole country. Although Mauritius is not that a large country, so it's going to be interesting to see how that scale works. And why is it important to focus on a specific place? What we found by piloting this infrastructure is if you focus on streets, neighborhoods, local communities, then people who are not normally linked to the networks that we are linked to, who go to all the same conferences as we do, who joins this webinar, they are also engaged and want to be part of co-creating solutions. Because people care about the neighborhood, and some of them, they might actually do great work on sustainability or climate, but they don't know that language, they don't use that language. So by being very focused on the area, we can build a network of people that then know people, and then you build a strong network of individuals from all different sides of society who can then be mobilized to concrete action in different specific points in the city. And the fourth key element I want to just touch upon today is what we call the steward organization, that on behalf of all the people and organizations that are part of this infrastructure, that they steward this work on behalf of everyone. So stewardship means that you manage and take care of something on behalf of someone else. And we see now that stewardship is coming more and more into is a word that's being more and more used also in organizations and business and sustainability. And I think the reason for that is it also connects us to nature, taking care of something, making something grow again. And I think this kind of mindset is quite important. So the steward organization and what we created there is both a legal framework, is a process framework, and is also a leadership framework. How do you actually lead on behalf of society, on behalf of both public sector, private sector, social entrepreneurs, academia, and citizens? How do you actually, both translate what people are saying so they can collaborate? How do you push things forward without yourself being the owner of the problem? So this is, I think, could be a separate talk, and I know several people on this call actually have the positions of leading these 17 infrastructures in different cities and also Mauritius, and I think sometimes we need to talk to each other to sort of share the frustration and the challenges of leading this. But I'm certain that this kind of leadership is key if we are to succeed in reaching both the climate goals and the SDG goals. So I'll now dive into to bring you some examples of how do you actually use or benefit from this infrastructure. You can, in many ways, say there's three ways of using the infrastructure. So now you see that you built this infrastructure in your city. There are a lot of organizations who own this infrastructure together as partners. There's a lot of individuals who's joined as well. So you have this network of people from different aspects of society who are really geared on being part of this change. So then you can use this infrastructure in basically 3 ways. One is you can use it as a place where you get access to resources and knowledge. So basically you can be an entrepreneur or a business or a public servant, and you can connect with the infrastructure, say, we are doing this project or we're trying to do something here. Who should we talk to? Who else is interested in this? What sort of funding mechanism is available for this kind of thing? What has been done before in another city? And then the stewardship organization will then ask that question to other people in the network who will then have that knowledge. So again, this is a people-centered infrastructure where we're using the knowledge that we all have to mobilize that at the right time, at the right place. The other part is, and this has been probably the biggest part of at least the infrastructure in Oslo, is there's quite a few areas where we need to try something new. We need to build a new kind of social infrastructure as a meeting place, or we need to test some garbage solution that is maybe too risky, maybe it's not easy for one company to do. And then you can use the infrastructure to find those partners and then build a collective experimental pilot projects. And using the infrastructure, you can then also get access to funding from other kind of sources. But what you then also need to accept is that the project and the results from the project are open source. So then we do it for everyone. I'll give you some examples on that in a few seconds. And the last way of using it is looking at specific thematics, focus areas where you need to, for instance, where you've been trying to solve something for many, many years, but you don't really seem to make any progress. So in Oslo at the moment, there's an arena for housing. There's a lot of discussion. What do we do with housing in cities? How do we make it more affordable? What are the solutions for that? And this is obviously a very political discussion. But now the infrastructure in Oslo has created an arena where we have that discussion, but also try to find those pilot projects together. So we can actually not only talk about it, but actually test something, always trying to create action. So let me give you some examples. From Pådriv Oslo, which is Pådriv is a name that has been used for the infrastructure in Oslo and also Norway on city development. So what we think is that each city or country will find their own name, but then use the same structure or the same framework. In Oslo, there's 44 organizations who are now partnering, and you could call it an infrastructure partner. And they come from all kinds of parts of society. So it's both public sector, obviously the city of Oslo, but also state actors. There's some very large building associations. There's some entrepreneurs, architects, but also people working on public health. So it's a really wide set of organizations. And then we're just about 250 individuals who have signed up and said, I could be a resource. I have something that could be useful for someone else. So that's the human network of connections. And they, again, obviously will connect us to a lot of other people. And during the last 3 years, Pådriv Oslo has been involved and developed about 50 projects on the ground. One of them is called the Vollebekk Factories, Fabrikker in Norwegian. And here was a district of Bjerke, which is a local municipality in Oslo. They found an empty building in the municipality. And they knew that in this area is going to be built a lot of new houses. So how can we use this empty building to also create some sort of culture and neighborhood feeling before people move in, so that we get this social infrastructure working? They then used the infrastructure Pådriv to create a collaboration with the commercial housing developers who would do the development in that area, and citizens, to then both develop, launch, and run this concept of Vollebekk Factories. And Vollebekk Factories is still running, and it's become quite an interesting hub for circular entrepreneurship and also community activities. So you see the two women on the screen here. They've been leading this from day one. And as you see in the background, this is a lot of not only small scale, but like there's a micro house being built there. That company has actually just moved a few years back out of this facility because they were scaling, and now are producing a lot more, but also still in Hovden. And there's been a lot of activities. Tens of thousands of people have been here to look and to visit and to be part of events and discussions. And it's been, I think, 30 to 40 entrepreneurs who's been through this hub, creating solutions and thinking of how do we create, how do we build a more sustainable city. The district of Berke has also created, used the infrastructure to create a template for how do we then use other empty buildings for this. And then I've started another collaboration with another housing developer on a similar type of project. And one of the key aspects, I spoke to the CEO of Obos, which is the largest housing developer in Norway, and they were part of this project. And I asked him, so what did you get out of it? And he was sort of positive with it's good to support the social entrepreneurs and the community, blah, 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 which they always say. But then he said that in sort of in a, almost when he left the door, that maybe, the interesting is to see is I think these other three projects we did in Obos wouldn't have happened because we got a mind shift of how we can collaborate. And that, I think, is some of the core things in what this infrastructure could do. So by doing something together, actually doing it and not just talking about it, we get this mindset shift that can create waves of change, both in organizations and between them. Another quick example, a circular resource center that it will enable the reuse of building materials. Another huge problem and an opportunity for reaching the climate goals is to obviously reuse a lot of the building materials that we have. It was initiated by a startup called Recircle. They're not part of the structure, but they know about the structure. That they contacted us and said, you know what, we think we need this big warehouse to store this kind of building materials, and this is lacking in Oslo. That's one of the reasons why we're not seeing any momentum on the reuse of building materials. And then they had been approached by Statsbygg, this is the Norwegian government building commissioner, and they've been rebuilding the government building due to the terror attack we had some years back. And they had a huge building tent over this site. And they said, so what do we do with this tent afterwards? And it's not a tent, it's like a building. So together they came to Pordrev and said, how can we do something that can benefit everyone? So what we did is we obviously contacted the city of Oslo. Pordrev has now created a non-profit company who was then donate. We got the donation from the tent from Statsbygg, also some startup money for that company. And now together with Recircle, but also a lot of the other stakeholders now building this demonstration site to pilot, is it possible? How do we do it? But we do it at scale. So we'll see, it's going to open just outside my window here, actually, in 6 months. And the tent is now being set up. And this happened within 12 months span. The last project I'll mention is a research project. Another really interesting way of using the infrastructure. There's a lot of research projects that are doing great things. And the more and more we see that they want to connect to a specific place and do like labs, living labs. So then they found that the infrastructure is a really good way to find partners, people that can actually be part of that living lab. Since the infrastructure is already there, it's really efficient to get things going. So this research project was on what do we do with all the rainwater we'll be getting? How do we manage that in better ways? So by using the infrastructure, they not suddenly, but by the stewardship organization connected them with a local school, and it ended up being actually an educational program at that school for the kids. So they became researchers together with the professional researchers. So they did a lot of testing, monitoring, and then they also started involving their parents and the neighborhoods. So the neighborhoods got involved. And the kids themselves actually presented this as a research conference. And one of the boys on the picture here, he said, I'm going to be a researcher when I grow up. I'm working with water, which I think is a job opportunity he didn't really know about before this happened. A second thing that was tested also in this research project is how do we involve citizens in a new way of creating solutions or coming up with ideas and suggestions for how to solve this problem. So we also run a citizen jury, which is one of the first citizen juries in Norway. This is a method that has been used in many other countries, but now was used in a specific area in Oslo to see how do we involve citizens in new ways. So this was some examples. We have many more, but I'll not end, but I'll stop soon before handing over to you, Elin, by mentioning two things. So one is, how do you make this work? Okay, so we have the framework. We have the method. It has been tested. It has been piloted, has been adjusted. It works in Oslo, it works in Trondheim, and it seems to work well in Mauritius. But there's some core sort of values and elements that needs to be in place, and that you can't really copy from somewhere. You have to build it and do it every day. One core thing we've seen is you have to align the goals of why you have this infrastructure with the city goals. So this doesn't become something on the side, but actually helps the city reach the climate goals or sustainability goals. If you do that, then you will have the support of the whole community, because everyone has agreed that this are the goals we want to reach, or at least everyone who's voting and believes in democracy. The second part is that this is obviously very important for the stewardship organizations, so the people running this, is you have to be trustworthy. And this is something you have to do every day. And that means you have to be 100% transparent. You have to treat people well. You have to respond. You have to be honest about mistakes. And you have to do that in all the relationships that are built in this network. It has to be built on trust. And then the reason why we started this process together with this large group of people in sort of in 2015 was because of we need to do something now. So we also have to incorporate a culture of action into everything we do. So we always have to discuss, so what can we do now? Not be led into this discussion of, yes, there's so many problems and so many things that is difficult and we'll never change and things won't happen and blah, blah, blah. We always have to sort of talk, but what can we do? What little thing can we do together that can maybe lead it somewhere? So have this positive outlook that action is possible and it can lead to something is also really important to have as part of the culture that is built around this infrastructure. And the last part is, of course, diversity. We need to involve a lot more people to understand these problems that we're facing. And that means that the teacher and the nurse and the engineer and the architect and the public servant, everyone needs to be involved. And today, a lot of the city development and climate discussion is not for everyone. Everyone is invited, but there's quite a big threshold sometimes to be part of that discussion, and especially be part of that action of doing something. So how do you always try to reach out to those who are not normally part of the conversation is also really, really important. I won't go into this, it's just a summary. So we'll send out the presentation of the different aspects. And this is, just to give an example, this is the setup and structure that Regeneration Mauritius is using. So basically, how is the organization structured? How is the funding done? What sort of activities, what sort of ways are we doing this? And this is like 3 separate webinars to go into. But I can just say that it is being done every day. So this is working. It's not like something we're thinking about. As a link to you, Elin, I'm thinking just to end with, so what could the benefits be for a city who decided we want to build this infrastructure? So as a municipality or a mayor who said, this is something I believe in. I think we need this. The benefits of using this infrastructure is you can't buy it. So there's no procurement. What you do is you invite people, stakeholders in the city, to sit down and say, should we build this together? Should we fund it together? It has to be together. It has to be a collective effort. If not, then everyone is just going to continue going to the municipality and say, you should do this and you should do this, and why aren't we this fixed? We have to have a collective feeling. The benefit is also that this can amplify what is already happening. So this is not sort of an substitute. You don't throw out what else you're doing. So for instance, in Oslo, there's a big work now in innovation districts. And we see that this infrastructure helps innovation districts to blossom. So it's not something that competes. It's like the framework or infrastructure at the bottom, which everyone can use. Also these kind of initiatives. Another benefit, it is really good at mobilizing people and organizations who want to do something. There's a lot of people and a lot of organizations who talk about doing something. But the infrastructure here really, the people who do something shine. So you get a focus on the people who actually do something, which I think is very useful. We have seen that it works alongside existing city structures. Yes, it does require some mindset thinking or shift from some city servants. How do you collaborate? How do you do things outside of the city organization? But it does work alongside it. And also within the city, we've seen that it actually increases the collaboration between the different departments in the city. Because by collaborating also outside, they meet in new ways. The infrastructure increases trust between the stakeholders because they start doing something and they start seeing that we're actually both part of the same problem and trying to solve the same problem. And for a city also, this is a very low cost infrastructure because you are sharing the cost with a lot of other stakeholders. And by having this infrastructure, the city also get access to more funding because there are more collective collaborative projects where also the co-funding is happening. So it's a way also of initiating projects that maybe was not part of the budget, but you now have an opportunity to be part of driving as a city. And with that, I would like to leave it to you, Elin, introduce you. Elin works in the city of Oslo, is a project leader for Hovenbyen, which is the geographic area that's been the focus in Oslo. And Elin has been part of using the infrastructure for some time now, and I think will give us a few sort of thoughts and reflections on how the infrastructure is useful from the city side.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to talk about how we've used Positive in Hovenbyen. So I'm a project leader for Hovenbyen in the city of Oslo, and this area is a sustainable expanding of the inner city. We have this fringe area, Hovenbyen, that actually is in the middle of the building zone. So the most sustainable about this is where it is situated. So we already have 9 subways in here, but it's a quite gray area with a lot of traffic barriers, and yes, and but we think it will be growing from the inner city, and we will make this the biggest developing area in Oslo. So we have this strategic plan. So when I started in this agency for the 3rd time for 6 years ago, I started to work with this strategic plan, and it was approved in 2018. So the vision of Hovenbyen is to be a future-oriented and climate-smart urban expansion, and the diversity and attractive urban areas intertwined with each other and the rest of the city. and walking and cycling and public transport should be the easiest and most attractive way to travel in Hovenbyen. That's exactly where it's situated. We think it should be possible, but today it's mostly cars in this area. But about involving and co-creation, we wrote in this plan that participation creates enthusiasm and anticipation for new urban areas. And we should, as the city of Oslo, has a yes attitude to good initiative. And when we wrote this, we didn't know about Pådriv, but we see now that we're very happy that Pådriv has this as the area to work in. And they help us in the city of Oslo to reach the goals of Hovenbyen. And I'm going to talk about 2 examples on how we have used Pådriv in Hovenbyen. This area is quite in the middle of Hovenbyen. And Hovenbyen is 11 square kilometers big. It's as big as the inner city, actually. And when I was working with this strategic plan, I wrote about this area, and we had a planning program for Ulven. And we wrote that the potential, this area has a potential to become a social gathering place and an area of recreation to a greater extent than today. But at that time, I didn't know how I was going to have some engagement in this area. I've been working here, walking around here for many years now, and I never met anybody here. And there's a saying about this church here that everybody can see the church, but no one knows how to get there. So it was not used in any way, and it was big traffic areas around all of it. But and I thought maybe I shall in some months contact they who was in this church, maybe the priest, and see how we can get some engagement here. But before I had done anything, they had maybe inspired of what we have written in this strategic plan. They had contacted Pådriv, and suddenly I was invited to a workshop, and suddenly many things happened I didn't need to do anything. It was just that we saw a community involvement that we didn't know was there. So I think here Pådriv has been a catalyst to gain engagement that we didn't know were there. And now a lot of things are happening here with them in charge for it. So it's a secret garden here, very secret. Now many use this, and it's young people who is growing and learning, and it's quite a very nice area now, and a lot of things are happening. So the second example I'm going to talk about is Breivoll. It's the area that we thought was, at least it wasn't very mature to get any developing things going on for a while, but we have to start now. We have a lot of traffic in this area, and we have this nice stream at the other side. And I have a group I'm working with the rail and road authorities and public transport agencies, and we are trying to see make a feasibility study to see if we could establish a train station here, or it's actually to take Alna station and place it here. We have a station up in the north here where there is not many, not in very many people around. So we think this area, this developing area, could be a motor about starting up things here. And we have a goal in Hovenbyen to have this productive city, because if you've been to the harbor in Oslo and all these nice areas, we don't have so much industry at all in Oslo, and the most of what we use is created in other countries and polluting their country. So it's a goal that we think this should be more local production in this city. And then Prodriv has taken an initiative to create a project that is the productive city with all these dwellings, and how this could be together. And so we have this consultant assignment to see how, on the physical conditions, it's a lot about ground conditions, how we can place this train station. And we have changed our consulting assignment after we started to collaborate with Prodriv, because we don't have that much money, and now we collaborate in a way that they do their part, and they have contacted the landowners and stakeholders. So they already have a lot of going on that we can use, and we can collaborate about this. So we have our part, and then it's just in the starting of thing, but it makes our work in the city of Oslo so much easier. And I think this could be a very exciting project, but it will go on for a while. So we're just in the starting point of it. So yes, that's what the two examples. So I think this is a new way of working, and I have been working with city planning before many years ago, and I started and I come back to the agency of 6 years ago, and starting to work with this Hovenbyen. And I think it's been a maturing time for all of this to happen. But we couldn't have started this 20 years ago. It was in the public, in the politicians, we weren't there, and this area was not mature either. But now I think a lot of things can happen, and we are very happy to collaborate and use Prodriv. Yes, that's what I had.
Thank you, Elin. That was very, very interesting, and I know there's a lot of details again behind what you said there. So there's a lot of the devil's in the details, but also successes in the details. So I think if someone is interested in learn more and gets some more insight into Elin, also the city of Oslo's experiences, I know that they're reachable. Before we open for questions and comments, which I really hope you have, I'll just end by inviting you and telling you a bit about how can we make this infrastructure available. So the infrastructure and the framework is open source. No one owns it. No one is making money of it. We want to make this available. So it is at the moment owned or steward is in the care of Prodriv in Oslo, and also with the help of SoCentral. So we're doing this jointly, and now we have decided to, based on the experience and the input from Mauritius, to make the framework available so it can be copied in other countries. We have the first of what we call the global pilot use in infrastructure now. The association, the stewardship organization in Mauritius is established or being established as we speak. We have an aim of finding 2 other cities next year and establish the infrastructure there together with them. So the cities then have to reach out to their local stakeholders and citizens. And then the next year, hopefully based on the network effect, building a critical mass of cities who can use it. And then C40 has challenged us to say, this could be interesting. We need to look at the details for this. But if we are to do it, we need to reach 100 cities, or 90, probably 97, Julia, within 2025. So then you get a bit nervous. How do you do that? So we have some ideas already on how could that be done, but we would love to connect with all of you here who are either have ideas on how how we can move forward. It could be on the tactical side of it. It could be that we have some insight that could be useful. We want to collaborate. We want to be part of it. We know of some funding that could be used here. So everyone who's interested, please contact us after the webinar. And for the pilot cities next year, the infrastructure needs to be built in those cities by those people. So there's not someone coming in and building it for them. It is done there. What can be done is we will provide technical support and obviously use that knowledge so that other cities again can learn from it. But it has to be built by the city itself. And we believe that the city, the mayor should initiate the process. We think by doing that, it's possible to scale this and make it work quite quickly. In Oslo, it was built from scratch, so it's taking a lot longer time, but now it's there, it's ready to be used. But the key thing is the city cannot own it alone. They have to own it in partnership with everyone else. So they had to invite people in very early to start a discussion, should we build this together? And Trondheim has done that in Oslo, in Norway. So we have some very sort of practical advice on how do you sort of do those steps. And it's not that difficult. We're talking about a few workshops, and then if people are engaged, then you start moving, and there's a specific there's some specific steps on how to do it. And we believe that from the first meeting to the infrastructure is set up, it will take about 6 months to get people involved.
All right, so we do have a few questions for all of you. I'll direct some of you directly, and if anyone has anything to add, then feel free to speak up. So first, thank you all for really interesting and inspiring presentations. And Julia, are there C40 cities that could be interested in this infrastructure? And what do you think they need of information, education, or referrals in order to invite city stakeholders to collectively build and run the infrastructure in their cities?
Thank you, Sophie. Can you hear me fine? I've obviously moved rooms to be connected to power source. Thank you, first of all, Thomas and Ellen, for those presentations. It's fantastic to see it, to start it coming together. We've had lots of conversations, but to see the infrastructure and the elements of it is super exciting. So Sophie, to your point, yes, I do think this would be very interesting for a lot of cities. As I said in my presentation, there's a lot of cities doing things like participatory approaches and citizens' assemblies, but they lack what I think is in this model, which is infrastructure. It's the tools to create it equitably, to have this stewardship element that I think is very important for cities. They could be the steward organization. It could be another organization as well. I think what's important about that organization is they do it from a benevolent perspective and aligned with the city's goals. So I really like those elements as well as the other ones, and why I think cities will be interested in this, because it's not necessarily trying to create something new and separate, but aligned with their objectives, which are always based in science and a lot of analytical work, as Ellen was saying, in terms of new development areas. Whatever it is that the city is trying to do is based on knowledge. The missing piece is how you bring people together and mobilize and create agency in these solutions, because in this very difficult time, cities do have limited capacity and resources. So the other element that I really like about it is this sort of self-financing, in a way, is that people are coming to it with their own resources and capacity, private sector, but individuals as well. And Thomas gave a few examples of the company that I won't try and pronounce, that left the door. It is, you can say it's all about collaboration, but it's a little bit business as usual. Everyone loves it and talks about it, but to spark new ideas that weren't there before, that are particularly aligned with people and the planet, is what I love about this. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Just one correction, we did challenge Thomas to say how we could get to 100 cities, but it's not about quantity per se. It's about scaling the impact of this equitably. So our premise for wanting to scale it to at least 100 cities is that this doesn't stay Nordic. And that's not to say that that's not a good thing. It's great, but the Nordic cities are high capacity, high income, and indeed high impact cities. So it's important that you lead on this and share the infrastructure. Thomas, I really appreciate you say it's open source. Anyone can grab it and use it, and that's important to have local partners. But scale is important. How do we make this accessible and useful and valuable for our cities in Latin America, in Africa? And of course, the Mauritius example is a first starting point in that. But I wonder if the model needs to continue to be morphed and changed for different cultural and political contexts. And that's where we need to really think a little bit more and concentrate our resources and thinking on. Anyway, now I'm being a little bit long-winded, but thank you very much for those great presentations. Did I answer your question, Sophie?
Yes, you did.
Can I just comment on that, Sophie? I think that you mentioned these 100 cities, and what it did, at least to us, was this: okay, this cannot be done by sort of doing it one at a time, and also this means that there needs to be a lot of people involved in doing this that is not part of the people we know. So I think when we've been working on this now, it opened a totally different way of how do we reach that? How is it possible? And then, SoCentral, just to make that clear, we are 10 employees. So we are not going to be that many. And the reason for that is because we don't want to be the company that's going to own everything. We want to then find the partners and understand how do we scale things so it actually is useful. But I'm happy that you also mentioned Mauritius, Julia, because that's, for us, that was also sort of a very important lesson to see that actually, and when we start discussing with my Mauritian colleagues, there was a lot of skepticism. Yeah, this is a Nordic model built on trust, and you have all the resources, right? But then, at least, and then people can correct me in the chat here, but my experience is that when we started presenting it, people will say even more in Norway, this is what we need. Because we do, people can trust each other, but we've forgotten that it's all about the people. And I'm also happy to say that with the few adjustments that was done on the structure itself in Mauritius, based on the conversation we had, I believe is for the better. So yes, I think it needs to be adjusted, also moving forward. And that's why I think these pilot cities will be important. But hopefully it will be something then that everyone else also can adapt or learn from, so the existing cities.
And just staying a little bit on Mauritius, Natalie has a question for you, Thomas. First, she says, thank you for interesting presentations to all of you. If there are any people present that are part of one of the existing stewardship teams, what would you recommend the team in Mauritius, who's only just getting started, to pay particular attention to right at the start?
Yeah, so should I answer that, or should we call out to someone else? I think it's, so I know there's a few people in the call who is in that role, and Natalie is also leading the stewardship organization in Mauritius. So Natalie, we've been discussing this for the last 7 months, but I think it's, it's really difficult in the beginning, because everyone asking, what is this? It's new. And then there's a lot of practical stuff. You're also setting up a structure. So there's a lot of structuring to be done. Partner agreements, getting the documentation up, meeting people, getting the funding together. So I think I would say at least from being part of the startup also now in Mauritius, having a group of people that says we are going to do this together, so you're not alone, I think is so important. I've seen that in Oslo also. This is not a one man or woman job. This is a team effort. You have to be more people involved, because it is impossible for one person to sort of see all the things that needs to be done and have all the skills that is required. So I think find that core group of people who will use their expertise and their time during the first phase until the funding is there is going to be key.
Thank you, Thomas. And Elin, how could the city of Oslo use the infrastructure in the years to come?
Yeah, we're just in the starting of something here. I think we can use our experience from now and use it in different areas in Oslo too, not just Hovenbyen. And we also want to have more projects in Hovenbyen too. So I just think we're going to continue to collaborate and making projects. Mm.
That is always a good start. And Thomas, who should initiate building the infrastructure in a given city?
Yes, yeah, so this is quite an interesting point, and so far, you know, it's been a bit different in the different areas. So in Oslo, it was obviously like a bottom-up initiative, or with people from different organizations coming together. We did, however, quite early on go to the city of Oslo and the political leadership and say, you know, is Oslo ready to be a pilot for this? And then they were very positive. So it was anchored early on, but it was driven from somewhere else. In Mauritius, very much the same. So people coming together from just different parts of society saying this is what we need. In Trondheim, it was the mayor who said, we want positive in Trondheim. And I think that direction is not the only direction, but I think if to have the scale and to get the speed up, I think it has to come from the city. So I'm not saying it cannot be done else in other ways, like we did in Mauritius. But if we are really going to have impact fast, I think the city has to decide we need this infrastructure in our city. And then they have to invite people in to create them together with them. So not, you know, if they keep owning it and feeling it that this is our infrastructure, we're going to give it to the city, then we have a problem. And that we've seen, we're discussing this with a few cities in Norway, and some of the municipalities, yes, we just want to do like a 6-month evaluation first before we decide, and maybe we should do a strategy of it before we talk about it. And it has to be the other way around. It has to be, this is the infrastructure, learning it together, finding those first people together, and then saying, should we try to do this? And then the city has to be active. You know, it has to make sure that the goals are aligned. It has to allow its people who are entrepreneurial, who want to do things, to be part of it. So, but if they do that in the right way, we have seen that it's well within their mandate. And it is very, you know, it's possible to get to do both things. So they can both be the municipality doing their own projects and use this infrastructure when that is beneficial.
Thank you. And one last question from Stello. What do you think of the smart city development in Mauritius, Thomas?
Sorry, what was the question?
What do you think of the smart cities development in Mauritius?
So for those who don't know Mauritius very well, there's a smart city scheme where it is possible to get approval to be a smart city, and then you build a lot of houses on farmland, basically, on sugarcane land. From what I've seen, there aren't many smart cities yet in Mauritius. So I think the scheme itself could be interesting, but it needs to be, I think, adjusted quite dramatically. I'm quite excited to follow as this smart city scheme that is done close to the airport at somewhere called Fernie. It seems like they have a different mindset of how to actually make something that is regenerative and sustainable, not just call it smart and add some technology and that's it. So I think in general, I'm quite skeptical of the smart word. not because the word is bad, but because it's been very much linked to technology. I find some of those initiatives quite dumb. So just to give a brief example, the Seoul, so the ambassador to Norway from Seoul, she came to Oslo for one reason, and that was they've been building smart cities for the last 15 years. And then they came and said, we need to build better cities. And they've said we failed. We've given the tech companies too much room, so they've been allowed to sort of develop our city, and it's not better for the people living there. So there was actually three ambassadors who were sent out in the world to different areas to learn the Nordic context and how do we now develop our cities in a different way. So I think we should I think technology is great if it helps people.
And I think this goes back to the quote that Julia ended her presentation with. And that is also a good way to end this seminar today. We are already a little bit over time. And like I mentioned, we want to build the next seminars based on what you want to learn, what you want to know more about. So please let us know if there's some specific topics that you want to dive deeper into. And you can either write that in the chat right away, or you can send us an email. My email is in the chat, sophie@SoCentral.no. So with that, I would like to once again thank all of the speakers for your presentations and for the lovely chat that we just had here up on the screen. And thank you to all the participants joining us today. And we look forward to bringing this conversation further and testing the 1717 model in 100 new cities, hopefully. So thank you all and have a wonderful day.